Welcome to Bedwi Crypto, Ben. It's a real pleasure to have you on the channel.
Yeah, thanks for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Okay. Thank you. Never a dull day in crypto. Everyone keeps on asking, is the bull market over?
That's a great question. I think one of the reasons this cycle is so much more confusing than prior cycles is because we haven't really had a euphoria phase like we had in prior cycles. There's just not as much interest in crypto right now. And that is actually something that we can look at with some of the just like the social sentiment and whatnot. If you look at the ROI from the low, and maybe you can show my screen here. If you look at the ROI from the low, I mean, you can see like the bull market has gone on for about as long as it normally does, right? Like this isn't, if the top were already in, it would actually kind of correspond to what we've historically seen. It wouldn't really be that surprising in that context. The reason why it's really tough, to kind of accept that is a lot of the main indicators that you might use to try and call the top never really gave that signal, right? So just to go through a few of them, if you were to look at the pi cycle top, right, it's an indicator a lot of people are very familiar with. This is at least so far, it has not given a signal that the top is in. If you go look at like things like the terminal price, again, it would also say, hey, could the top really be in if we haven't seen this type of euphoria? What I think is going on is I think we're sort of in this phase right here, in that sort of that 2019 phase where we've gotten a nice move up, right? And there's no denying that Bitcoin is up like 8x off the lows, at least from the low to the high. But we're not really able yet to move higher to sort of the top of that area, primarily because arguably of monetary policy, right? I think monetary policy is kind of causing Bitcoin to stall out around 100K, and we actually saw the same thing in the 2019 cycle. And just before we get too far into this, I just want to provide the framework for why we're talking about it in through the lens of 2019 and not 2013, 2017, and 2021. Because again, if you look at all the major market cycle tops, you're looking at Q4 of every post-halving year, and then therefore you could argue that this time is theoretically no different. But I do want people to be aware that this top that we've either formed or might form over the next couple of months is actually a lot more similar to the one we had in 2019. And there's a few reasons for it. One of those reasons is if you look at quantitative tightening going on in the United States, what you'll see is that just like the 2019 cycle, Bitcoin had this massive bull market while quantitative tightening, while the Fed was reducing their balance sheet, right? So that's a very similar dynamic we had in 2019. Another similar dynamic that we had back in 2019 is no one really cared, right? And that's kind of what it is today. Like we've seen Bitcoin go up a lot, but if you look at the price of Bitcoin color coded by the social interest, where blue is really low interest and red is really high interest, no one really cares right now. And that's kind of like what it was in the 2019 cycle, where you don't really find a top on euphoria. It's almost like you find a top on apathy. People just stop caring for one reason or another. And so you could argue that we're more so in that phase of the cycle where there hasn't been as much interest. And that's primarily because while Bitcoin has gone up, the altcoin market hasn't really gone up. And normally it's the altcoin market going up that really brings retail back to the cryptoverse. One thing I will highlight again is we saw a pretty big shift in market dynamics last cycle when quantitative tightening ended in September of 2019, because as we know, that was when Bitcoin dominance found a pretty major top last cycle, was exactly when quantitative tightening ended. And so I kind of think something like that might happen this cycle as well, where QT ends, Bitcoin dominance funds some type of a top, and then it starts to go down. And that's only a few weeks away from now. So in terms of sort of answering the question, like, is the top end, are we in a bear market or not? It at the current time, right, we have to be open-minded to the idea that the top could be in. I've often said that the top is likely either in October or December. That's kind of where I think. I mean, it's always possible it's November, but I think it's going to either have already been in October or you might get one higher high in December. Now, the hard part right now is how do we know, right? Well, historically, when you look at, say, the 50-week moving average, or if you look at, I mean, some of these more hand wavy indicators like the RSI, they really aren't that great by themselves, but they're better when you're looking at like confluence with other indicators. All prior cycles have ended when Bitcoin was getting those weekly closes below the 50-week moving average. And so we haven't had that yet, but we are currently trading below it, although it's not the end of the week yet. And also, if you look at the weekly RSI, we've had this structural support level for a long time, just like that 2017 cycle. Whenever this gives, if it gives, then the cycle's arguably over. So right now we're at a pretty critical area. And also, when you look locally, if you had no idea about anything related to the 4-year cycle and you just thought this is any normal downturn, we should be forming a low soon if the top is not in. Because if you look at all these prior drops, they always tended to culminate in the low around the time of the death cross, right? So the death cross is when that 50-day moving average crosses below the 200-day moving average. And you can see in 2023 and in 2024 and in earlier 2025, every time we had a death cross, it actually corresponded to a local low in the market. So the way I'm playing it is as such, right? I mean, I remain open-minded to another high so long as we don't get multiple weekly closes below the 50-week moving average, which is currently trading at around 103K. We haven't had one yet, so that's still a good thing, but we still have a little bit of ways to go. And then also, I would watch for the reaction here as you get the crossover of the 50-day and 200-day SMA. That's going to be your best bet. If there's going to be a rally into the end of the year, that's gonna be when it starts, and that's probably about a week from now, right? Maybe a little bit less than a week. I would say maybe like Tuesday of next week, maybe Wednesday of next week could be when that death cross occurs. Of course, it depends on what the price action does between now and then. But that's what I'm currently looking at, right? So if you get a weekly close below the 50-week moving average, a couple of them, it might be time to bite the bullet and just say, all right, we're going to have a downturn into 2026. But I will say, if there is no euphoria phase to end the cycle, if this is all we get, or even if there's another rally to a slightly higher high, I think that the bear market would be a lot more muted than prior bear markets. Not only have we seen diminishing losses from one cycle to another, but without euphoria, you're probably not going to have that same type of deep sell pressure that you might get that would cause one of those 80% drops. I mean, I know we had a pretty big drop in 2020, but I think we kind of have to ignore the pandemic as something that is not really a data point we should put a lot of weight in.
Black swan. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when the unemployment rate basically spikes to like 15% overnight. And I don't think that's going to happen again. So and in that correction, you essentially just had like a 50% drop. So if the top is in or very close to being in, then you probably just see a 50% drop from the highs to the 2026
For Bitcoin,
lows.
we're talking about.
For Bitcoin, yeah. If somehow we are able to go up more and actually get a parabolic rally, and if alt season happens after everyone's given up and everything ends up playing out like that, then I would argue that you're going to have a deeper correction, more like a 70% drop. But that would be like from a higher price, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I think that's kind of where we are right now, and I think for me, I am a student of the market. I cannot know for sure how it's going to happen. I just know historically when we drop below the 50-week moving average on weekly closes, that's when the cycle's over, right? And we've had a few close calls this cycle already. You can see we've had some moves below it, but we've always been able to recover by the end of the week. So we'll see where we end up by the end of the week, and then maybe go from there.
100%. So you're still a pro 4-year cycle. So you're working with in the assumption that this is a 4-year. There's no extended cycle like most people are calling for. By the end, last quarter of the year, that's when the bull market finishes. So by December, that's your thesis.
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's possible for some altcoins to continue doing okay into early 2026, just like in the 2017 cycle, some altcoins did well into early 2018. But I do think for Bitcoin, the cycle ends this quarter. I don't think it's going to go into 2026. But you could have an example where, from wherever the high is, if Bitcoin does get a drop, it might just go back to that 200-week moving average by mid 2026. and then try to like build a base off of that and perhaps go higher from there, right? Like it doesn't have to be an 80% drop. It could just be, it could be one of those things where like the people who don't think next year will be a bear market, and then if we do get a correction into early next year, they might end up capitulating in mid 2026, thinking there's going to be a much bigger drop, and then maybe that's the only drop we get, and then we just go right back up into the next cycle. So I mean, it's important to remember that monetary policy does play a big role, and the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, will be leaving his post in May.
I believe.
Yeah, in May. So my guess is they're going to replace him with someone a lot more dovish, and they're going to try to reignite the animal spirits in the markets.
And that's my other question. The market is affected a lot by U.S. politics, like it or love it or hate it. That's the fact. And U.S. politics has been crazy this year. That's, I think, one of the reasons where every time we get a momentum in the alt season or in the crypto market, something happens on the U.S. front, whether it's tariffs, whether it's like there's the uncertainty always there and affecting now the government shutdown. First of all, the government shutdown, for people that my audience is predominantly in the MENA region, so they're not very well versed in the U.S. politics. The government shutdown, that's just to extend the monetary, extend the spending, pretty much, correct?
I mean, they basically just can't. Yeah, they can't come to an agreement on the budget. Like they can't just come to an agreement on how to proceed from here. And so rather than a normal country or a more reasonable country, they decide to just shut down things and not pay workers, right? Like I don't even have to tell you, like people don't even have to establish what country we're talking about when we talk about a government shutdown, right? Like it is the United States, because we are the ones, for whatever reason, can't figure out a better way to solve our problems, rather than have two political parties basically just seeing who can hold out longer, you know. But the really negative thing about government shutdowns is after they continue to go on and on and on, like we're seeing right now, eventually both parties get blamed, right? And that's the thing, is that the constituents for both parties will start blaming the party, like both parties. It's not like sort of a one side or the other. It's like, yes, you guys need to work together on this and come to a solution, because people aren't getting paid out here. And I mean, even air traffic, we're starting to see issues with that, right? We've seen a 10% reduction. You know, my wife had to sit on the tarmac for a couple of hours recently, just because they don't have enough air traffic controllers. So yeah, like we are seeing issues, and that, I think, it needs to get solved. And I'm sure as the markets continue to drop and we see weakness, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the government to end the downturn. It's easy to kind of continue it as long as the markets are going up, right? Like people are generally happy, like, oh, whatever. But the minute the markets start to drop, like we're seeing now, like Bitcoin's down 20% from the highs, but you also have the S&P starting to correct, right? The minute that stuff happens, you start to get a lot more pressure on the politicians to actually do something.
You know, the crazy part that I noticed that I didn't know until recently, like I know a lot of people are not getting paid, like traffic controllers and like the military parts of the military and stuff. However, the Congress and the House still gets paid. I was like, that for me is crazy. So the essential services don't get paid, and the people that are doing the delays get paid. I found that really crazy, but that's not here nor there.
It makes no sense, but if you think about it, you know, it's not surprising that that's the way they do it,
right? Let me ask you about something. Historically speaking, let's say October was the top. Let's say October is the top. We have two scenarios, October or December. Let's say October is the top. Where do you see Bitcoin potentially bottom? And what's the time frame in your opinion?
I would say worst case scenario would be October to October, right? Because I mean,
for 1 year.
Yeah, like I mean, all the prior bear markets have been about 1 year. I mean, even last cycle was November to November. Cycle before that was December to December. Cycle before that was November to, I think, actually early January. They've all been about 1 year. So I think that's kind of what you have to go in as like sort of the baseline, is that, hey, it could last a year. But there are scenarios where I could see it only lasting until the summer as well. And that I could see, because like if you remember last cycle, Ethereum got a drop, but it actually bottomed out in the summer, right? Like, so it's not, it's not impossible for Bitcoin to do something like that, where it gets like a big drop, and then like everyone panic sells in the summer thinking it's going to go lower in Q4, and then it just doesn't, like it starts to go back up. So I would, my guess is that if the top is in already, then you're going to have about a 50% drawdown from that high. So that would basically put you between, say, 60K, 70K, something like that, would be my guess as to where the low would be. Now, if we
So
go up a lot more, right? If we go up to 140, your low is still going to be probably 60 to 70K. But if Bitcoin surprises everyone, which it does sometimes do, and if it goes all the way up to 200 or something crazy, then you likely get a deeper correction, right? It would be a lot more than a 50% drop. It would probably be more like a 70% drop,
yeah,
or a 75% drop. But again, like, we haven't gotten to that point yet. So it just based on what I've seen in the markets, like if October was the top, then I would expect maybe about a 50% drop.
which is equates to last cycle's bull market top, which is around the 69, give or take. Yeah.
Right. And it would more or less correspond to the 200-week moving average, which we often find support at. I mean, I know last cycle we went below it, so we could go below it again, but it's currently trading around 55K. And, sometime next year, it'll be between 60 and 70K. So that's kind of what screams the most likely outcome to me if the top is in, is going back to 60 to 70K.
You spoke previously about the monetary policy, how much of a big effect it has. So we have December, quantitative tightening is gonna stop according to the Fed chair, and we have May. There's gonna be a new chair again. It's gonna be put by Trump, so he's gonna have someone that's very dovish and cuts rates a lot. We have midterm elections, I believe, next year, early next year sometime.
Right.
And we have now the courts might rule against Trump. That's how it looks like, against Trump's tariffs, and they have to refund some of the money that Trump got from the tariffs, and it's like a lot of money, and they're saying that it's going to be some sort of taxpayer refund. Is going to be given. So all these put together. And I listened to Raoul Paul about his business cycle, how we're now in a 5-year business cycle. Does that change your thesis on the 4-year, or your plan for it as normal until proven otherwise?
Yeah, I think I'm going with if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I mean, I think there is a way where multiple people can still claim they're correct if it plays out like that. So like what I mean is, if you believe that we're here, right? Like if you believe that we're here, which is kind of where I think we are, right? We're just trying to hold 100K just like we were trying to hold 10K. You could have a scenario where the markets get sort of a brief downturn into 2026, right? Um and and it feels truly over. But that doesn't mean that you can't kind of come back out of it into the early phase of next cycle, and then for some people to kind of say this is just one cycle, even
Yeah.
though you would still have your bear market in 2026. And last cycle, when quantitative easing started, I believe it was in September of 2019, like Bitcoin did go down first, right? Like it didn't immediately go up. I mean, I guess when QE started, it went up and then came back down, and then it went up a little bit more. So you could have a scenario where that kind of repeats itself, where it just kind of wanes here, price starts to drop, but it doesn't give you a full 80% drop. And so the people that are calling for, more of like an extended cycle, it might end up looking like sort of like a left translated cycle for next cycle, where you might get like a drop like that, and then it kind of stalls out in the summer to the downside, and then maybe goes back up into 2027 and 2028. And so when you look back on it in 10 years, you could argue, hey, like this is all just one cycle, just like this was all one cycle. But what's interesting is if it does play out like that, you still could have a top in Q4, just like we always do, and then you could still have a major low in the midterm year, just like we always do. And we're like spinning our wheels trying to figure out like how can we make the narrative that this time is different, even though it might ultimately be the same. So I think I think there exists a scenario where like multiple views could be construed as correct, if that makes sense. Because like it's not like I don't see the merit to the idea that these guys are talking about. And if you look at like the whole AI boom and whatnot, and the tailwinds that have been there and probably will remain there, things could obviously go on for a while. But I think if you were to see what people are calling an extended cycle, I think it would more so be a left translated cycle in the next cycle, where you might get an earlier top, say 2027, 2028, and then that ends up being the top. But I would sort of view that as just the top for the next cycle, not an extended, not a continuation of the current one.
Okay. In that scenario, let's say that we have a downturn. What's your base case for Bitcoin dominance? Where do you see Bitcoin dominance going?
Yeah, dominance is tricky because we are getting close to the end of QT, and we know last cycle when QT ended, dominance found the top for a while. So I know today it's now down below 60%. So, and you got some of these altcoins like popping off a little bit, but I mean, still dominance has gone up like 7 or 8 weeks in a row.
I have to admit, I expected the recent downturn. I expected the dominance to be like around 65 by now. I'm surprised it's holding around 60. I'm being honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at like 2017, there was a move up by dominance, and then it got a brief correction in early November before then going higher into early December. So we might just kind of be at that point where we're getting a small pullback by dominance into that early November phase before then just going higher into December. That's what I'm thinking is the most likely outcome. Also, too, if you look at total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, it actually found a major low the first week of December. And we also know that low also corresponded to where alt Bitcoin pairs essentially bottomed when QT ended. So I'm wondering if we might have an example here where total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin goes down back to say 0.44, 0.4 by the very beginning of December, and then gets a big bounce from that level. And you can see in 2017, there was a bounce by this metric into early November, right? Like there was a bounce, but then it ultimately came lower. It went lower into early December. So I think we might just be in that kind of that phase where we're seeing a little bit of a bounce by alt Bitcoin pairs, but liquidity should still kind of rotate back to Bitcoin as we go into early December, would be my guess.
It's always the safest bet over a 4-year period. Always the safest bet. You get like these few months that outperform, but over a 4-year cycle or long term, Bitcoin always outperform. I've always been in that camp.
Right.
A quick one. Everyone keeps asking, will we see an alt season this cycle, or is it mainly Bitcoin driven?
Yeah, it's been a Bitcoin maxi cycle, basically for the last like four years.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because of monetary policy. I mean, again, like the 2019 rally by Bitcoin was also a Bitcoin maxi bull run. It just lasted a lot shorter than this one because quantitative tightening ended last cycle in the pre-halving year rather than the post-halving year. I mean, interest rates are above the Fed, above the 2-year yield. So you could argue that interest rates are still restrictive. And when you're in restricted territory, the safer things tend to do better, right? It's why Bitcoin has outperformed altcoins. It's why gold has outperformed most other metals. And it's why the Magnificent Seven outperform a lot of the micro cap stocks, because people want to buy something they think can withstand whatever turmoil might come our way over the next few years. And, even if you do, even if markets do go into an economic downturn, like Apple and Meta and Microsoft are companies that can likely survive that, whereas there's a lot of companies that probably wouldn't survive, just like Bitcoin could survive a big economic downturn, in my opinion, but that doesn't mean that all altcoins would survive it. So I think a lot of people just kind of concentrate into the thing that is the safest within each asset class.
I think my majority of altcoins can't survive just one cycle, to be honest.
Right. Well, they can't even survive one cycle. I mean, yeah, but that's true. But but a lot of them have never really been around for a full business cycle, right? They've
And
we haven't really seen a full blown recession, and hopefully we don't, right? I mean, I'm not. I mean, it's certainly possible that we do, but if we do, then most altcoins would literally just go to zero. They would not come back. I think for many cycles, a lot of people just assume that a lot of these alts will come back, and they're kind of getting a glimpse of this cycle of, hey, like not every altcoin is going to go to an all-time high. But yeah, I mean, it's not impossible to get an alt season, but in order to get one, I think Bitcoin has to wake up a little bit and start moving back up.
and the question is, do we have enough time or for them to have a proper alt season? Look, I still believe certain altcoins will perform, certain narratives, certain institutional coins will have a run, but I don't believe we have enough time this cycle, unless we go into an extended cycle and like Q1, Q2, 2026. That's a different story. I don't
Right.
think we do have enough time for.
Right. You could have a scenario where it does like what it did last time, where like if you take a bar pattern here from like when it found these lows to then the next alt season, like if this is where we are, then maybe it plays out like that, right? Where alt Bitcoin pairs just kind of hug the lows for a while, and then you get an alt season into like 2027, 2028 or something. Like it could play out like that. I'm not completely against that idea, because I mean, to some degree, it does seem like we're running out of time, But
Yeah.
I also know that some of these alt seasons like can take place in 4 to 8 weeks. Like they don't have to take place over a year. Like it's possible that you get one and it just happens over like 4 to 8 weeks, and it's like a whirlwind, and then everyone's like, wait, what just happened? But yeah, I mean, we are running out of time, and if Bitcoin doesn't start moving up soon, then there's just not going to be enough time for it to happen, I think.
With alt season, do you think the AI thesis, the AI, like with all the big tech and focus on the AI, Nvidia, Magnificent Seven, the whole thing, did that take some of the juice of that would fuel the alt season? Like people are going, the attention now is more into AI. The attention has been into AI for the last few years now, a year and a half to 2 years, has been focused on AI more. Like Bitcoin had its run, but you don't see that FOMO. Of course, the monetary policy is one of the reasons, 100%. Could the other reason be the AI narrative that's been going around?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable narrative that you could look to. I think another narrative is just within crypto. I feel like a lot of investors kind of lost their way, and they ended up like a lot of times in alt season, it's at least the projects that are pretending to do something that are the ones that do well. But this cycle, it feels more so like it's just been mostly chasing meme coins, right? Like people are mostly chasing that. And if you think back to like early 2020, even the president of the United States launched his own meme coin. So like it's kind of hard for a lot of serious developers in crypto. Like if you're a developer, do you want to go spin your wheels in crypto for 4 years developing a project just for some random meme coin to outperform your 4-year gains on a single afternoon? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of developers are like, yeah, I want to go where my work is actually valued. And it feels to me like a lot of crypto investors have not really valued innovation and tech this cycle. They've more so just valued meme coins and cash grabs, and a lot of people just fully buy into scams, knowing they're scams, but they just want to buy in and get out before it all comes unwinding down. So I think that's a big part of it too, is just and that might relate to your whole AI idea. Like if you're a developer, maybe you go develop in that area where you feel like your work might actually be appreciated, because in crypto, for the last few years, investors have not really rewarded innovation and tech as much as maybe they should have.
Question for you: are you still fully in the market, or have you taken more risk off approach?
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a little bit off the table. Like I sold some Ethereum back at like 4,900. Just when it swept the high, I sold some of it because I bought some Ethereum back in April. That was like actually the first time I bought it this cycle was when it back in April because that was when I thought it had bottomed against Bitcoin. And I did take a little bit off the table back in I guess in August, but I still have, I would say, like a majority of that position. Um
Okay.
what I'm kind of looking at right now is just kind of the reaction here at the 50 week, and I would say on a couple of weekly closes below that, I probably would offload more
So
of my position.
so you've been one of the most accurate people to call this cycle. Like I have to admit, like from Bitcoin dominance, from Ethereum going home, from all your calls, you've been spot on. Sometimes people don't want to hear it, but you've been spot on. When what will
Thanks.
trigger you to be fully out of this cycle? For you to be fully out. When will you sell all your bags?
I don't think I would ever be fully out. Even if you told me next year we're a bear market for sure, like we knew for sure, like I still don't know. I mean, I think part of it is like I always will hold some of my Bitcoin no matter what, because it's kind of an acknowledgement that even though I've gotten some things right, there's still some like acknowledgement of, hey, like no one actually knows what's going to happen. We're all just guessing, right? And so if I were to sell everything, then there's no reason for me to be ever bullish, and I would then view things through a more bearish lens rather than trying to be more objective. I feel like if you have some skin in the game, it allows me to at least be a little bit more objective about things and not ignore bullish developments. Because like I feel like if you have nothing in the market, like if you have no skin in the game, you're just going to ignore any type of bullish development, or you're going to want to ignore it because you have a bias that it's going to go lower. Normally, what I do is I keep at least like 20 to 30% of my Bitcoin, usually. Okay. Now, last cycle in 2021, I sold 87% of my Bitcoin
Okay.
by April of 2021, because that was when all my indicators were firing. Um, but I think this cycle I'd probably aim to hold at least a third through the first half of 2026, even if it is a bear market, because I don't know. I mean, like, what if the other guys are right and I'm wrong? Um, it's okay to be made fun of for being, for getting things wrong. Like we all get things wrong, and people are gonna dunk on us when we do. But it's nice having a consolation prize when you are wrong, of at least having some type of hedge so that you're not wrong and poor. Really, like I'd rather.
Hundred
There's a
percent.
famous saying. I'd rather be um, uh, wrong and rich than poor and right. you know.
100%. Look, no one knows 100% what's going to happen. Absolutely no one. Last cycle was, if you remember, there was this trader that was calling 100k, 100k, 120k. What's his name? I can't remember the name. There was a trader that everyone was
Oh,
saying last
Plan
cycle.
B.
Plan B. Yeah, everyone was calling. You're right until you're wrong. So no one is right all the time.
Right.
It's that what I like about following you, and for everyone, I'm gonna leave the links for all Ben's channel underneath. You're always have a right set of mind. So I'm this is my thesis. I could be wrong, but I'm planning according to this because of this, and that. So you have reasons behind it, and you work towards it. If things change, your thesis change. You adjust. You're not just stubborn, blindfolded. And there's a lot of people that stick to their guns just because they're stubborn. I love the openness that you have. That's actually refreshing to have that. So thank you for that. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, and and
Finally,
and and I will say, in Plan B's defense, he also had a good run for the few months leading up into that. Like, I mean, it's tough because what happens is people get a lot of things right, and then they feel invincible, and then they get humbled. That's kind of how it works with every trader.
100%. And there was after in the bear market, there was Capo that kept on calling down. Then he wrecked a lot of people afterwards. But we shouldn't be stuck. I think we should always be flexible and take any new data, take it, analyze it, and adjust our position. But for some reason, human nature, they don't want to correct. They just want to stick to they want to stick to their guns. Unfortunately,
Right.
and finally, to wrap it up, what's your best advice to the crypto community right now? whether you're in a bull market, bear market, or just sideways, how should investors think over the next few months, in your opinion? Of course, not financial advice.
I mean, like the way I've been successful in crypto is just denominating my portfolio in Satoshis rather than US dollars. So if you can do that, and you're not just saying you're doing it, but if you're actually doing it and you're thinking in terms of Satoshis, then it makes the market a lot easier because, yeah, you know that every 4 years or so you're going to have a bear market, but you kind of have this expectation that in the next cycle, Bitcoin will just go higher anyways. Whereas with altcoins, they're more short-term trades. So I would say this, like, if you do get into the altcoin market and you make some nice gains, and there are some nice gains to be made, hopefully over the next month or two. And I mean, even today, some of the altcoins are doing well. If you do make gains, just remember, like, trade them back to Bitcoin at the very least. I would say by early 2026, because a lot of those gains can round trip themselves. So just remember, value your portfolio in Satoshis, and then, over multiple years, I think you'll see your portfolio just kind of slowly grow.
100%. There's something I usually say on my channel regularly: hope for the best, plan for the worst. So hope it will go till 2020. We'll never see a bear market. Hope for that, but plan that it's ending in the next couple of months. Plan for it. That way you're not surprised.
Exactly.
And that's how you see it. Never marry your bags. Bitcoin is the king, whether you like it or not. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Treat it as such. Benjamin, it's a real pleasure having you on Badwi Crypto. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights with the community. Everyone here really appreciated. Guys, please make sure you check Benjamin Cowen into the Cryptoverse. The links are going to be all underneath. And tell me what you think about this interview. Thanks again, Ben.
Thank you, Frank.
Always
Thanks for
a
having me.
pleasure.